Now it's time for 3x3 Experiment by JCD. Comparing stories from ABC, CBS, and NBC. The never-ending 3x3.
Breaking news off the coast of Florida. The Coast Guard tonight has launched a search for 39 people reported missing after a boat believed to be piloted by human smugglers capsized off the coast about 45 miles east of Port St. Lucie. According to a survivor, the boat left the Bahamas on Saturday but encountered rough weather and then capsized. None of them apparently had life vests.
The government tonight that the global shortage of computer chips is slowing the economy and could force some factories to close. So the supply chain crisis, shortages, and inflation could get worse. Here's Tom Costello.
It's not just cell phones and computers. Microchips today are critical components in an endless list of products. TVs, refrigerators, power and communication systems, aviation, toys, cars, trucks, the list goes on. But the Commerce Department reports many U.S. companies had just a 5-day supply of chips on hand late last year, down from a typical 40-day supply. And 80% of computer chips are made in Asia.
Today, our semiconductor supply chain is far too dependent on conditions in countries halfway around the world.
But tonight, critical Chinese manufacturing hubs and ports are slowed, shut down, or gridlocked as China tries to contain Omicron. And that means higher prices in the U.S. New cars already up 15%, expected to climb even more. Clothing expected to jump 3 to 10%. Furniture by 10%. Electronics by 10% or more. In New Jersey, Pish Posh Baby is struggling to get everything from strollers to high chairs.
We're really concerned that inventory is not going to get out quick enough before Chinese New Year, as well as slow down production that we desperately need for spring.
China alone is responsible for a third of the world's manufacturing. It used to take ships 50 days to reach the U.S. Now it's taking 110 days.
We don't see any signs of things getting better. If anything, it's getting a bit worse. We haven't had any let-up in Americans' preference for consuming goods.
Experts say the world's manufacturers are still struggling to keep up with U.S. demand, sending prices soaring. Until that consumer demand slows, prices are unlikely to come back down. Lester?
Tom Costello, thank you. In just 60 seconds, the big news about the SATs, what students and parents need to know.
Affect more Americans than the rising cost of groceries. Overall, the price of groceries are up 6.5% compared to a year ago. Well, now it's the price of orange juice that's putting the squeeze on your pocketbook. CBS's Manuel Bojorquez is in Florida, where they are expected to have the worst orange harvest since World War II.
Stay small and it won't get any bigger than that.
It's called citrus greening, a disease afflicting Florida orange groves spread by an invasive insect, leaving trees looking like this.
So it kills it from the inside?
Yeah, all the roots are going to go first. Wow. So when you have no roots, you have no leaves, no fruit.
Brian Farina's family established this grove near Orlando 70 years ago. It's hard for him to imagine that the state is forecast to have its smallest orange crop since before the Farinas laid down roots here.
This is what you devote your life to.
Yep, all of our land is citrus, so when you hear numbers like that, it's devastating.
There is no known cure for citrus greening. In fact, in groves like this one, it's safe to assume most trees have some degree of it. One telltale sign, the amount of fruit that's fallen to the ground or is unusually small.
At its peak, Florida produced 244 million boxes of oranges a year. It's set to produce only 44.5 million this year. But demand for orange juice grew nearly 50% at the start of the pandemic. So prices for orange juice concentrate, already up nearly 14%, will likely climb higher.
Lately, actually, I have been drinking less orange juice because prices are going up.
What do you foresee in your future?
That's $1 million question. We're going to stay in it, and we have diversified, so we're making sure we spread ourselves out and try to find different ways to keep agriculture in our family.
So they've added other crops and even set up this store to supplement their income, but other farmers have sold their land to developers. And over the last 20 years, the number of acres harvested for oranges in Florida has dropped by more than half. Nora?
Manny Bajorquez, thank you.
Pencils, the erasers, the anxiety. At least the first two will become things of the past for the SATs. The College Board announcing today the tests will go digital as a growing number of colleges do away with them. Here's Rahima Ellis.
It's the test that looms so large for millions of high school students like Natalia Cosio.
Oh yeah, I've definitely felt a lot of pressure taking the SATs.
Now the SAT will move from pencil and paper to digital. Today, the College Board, which administers the SAT, announced a change it hopes will relieve some of the stress. As of 2024, students will only take the standardized test on laptops or tablets at testing centers. The test will be shorter, 2 hours instead of 3. Reading passages will reflect a wider range of topics to make the test more culturally relevant. On the math section, calculators will be allowed. Why do this now?
There are a set of changes, benefits, and improvements that we've been hearing from students and educators that we can only deliver if we're a digital test.
Nearly 80% of U.S. colleges and universities will not require ACT or SAT scores for admission in fall of 2022. And during the pandemic, fewer students have been taking the SAT. Do you worry that that time may be outpacing the need for the SAT?
The data shows that students still really want to take the SAT and see how they do. That gives colleges another data point and one that they want to make sure we keep making available to students.
While many schools were moving away from the SATs before COVID, even more have taken that turn now.
The shift in the SAT doesn't mean the SAT goes away. It just means the SAT becomes a part of a more robust picture of who a young person is. And we should all be thankful for that.
Natalia took part in a pilot program for the digital SAT.
I preferred the digital SAT version compared with the written SAT version because it was a lot more clear and concise.
A standard test changing for the times. Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
Up next.
Hate crimes against Asian Americans have risen dramatically since the start of the pandemic. In New York City alone, anti-Asian attacks were up 343% last year, according to the NYPD. CBS's Elaine Quijano visited with a group of seniors.
Hit, good, nice. They've been taunted and had some close calls, but these Asian American seniors never trained to defend themselves until now. Septuagenarians like New York City native Mary Yuen.
Good, Mary, good. What do you think is the most important thing that you've learned so far from the class?
To be very aware of your surrounding. And I'm always very aware, but I do have friends who are older or younger. They don't pay attention.
Sammy Yen started teaching these self-defense classes at New York City's University Settlement Center after someone told his dad to go back to China. Armed with years of martial arts training, Yen's objective is clear.
The simple goal is just to empower the students to be able to go outside, to do their chores, go to work, and just get home safely. Be aware of threats before they happen and give yourself time to get away.
Mary Yuen now carries that knowledge with her and gratitude for her young teacher.
Keep your eyes on me. Excellent, very good. What do you think of Sammy?
He's really wonderful. He's very dedicated. He doesn't mind if you punch him the wrong way. I don't know. It's like, oh my, it's like, harder, harder.
Sounds like you enjoyed that a little bit.
Too much.
Defying hate with power and joy. Elaine Quijano, CBS News, New York.
Got to stamp out the origins of that hate, too. We'll be right back.
Next for us tonight, the severe COVID restrictions in China just 10 days before the start of the Olympics. Although the Chinese government is reporting just a small number of new COVID cases, the country is taking drastic measures as thousands of athletes begin to arrive for the Olympics. Janice Mackey-Frayer is in Beijing.
Tonight, China's government going to more extreme lengths to contain COVID cases 10 days before the Winter Olympics. Abruptly sealing off neighborhoods in Beijing, officials say they'll mass test 2 million people. There's nothing we can do to get rid of it, he says. The entire city caught in a dragnet over a handful of reported cases and ramped up fear. Anyone buying cold medication recently ordered to take a test to prove they aren't infected.
As more people are being told they have to get tested, sites like this are popping up around the city.
Beijing's first cases of the Omicron variant, testing China's rigid zero tolerance for COVID. As world attention turns to China for the Olympics, Chinese leaders had hoped to showcase success in managing the virus.
Beijing faces a dilemma, right? That might also explain why so far they've refrained from imposing a citywide lockdown.
With Beijing under restrictions, athletes and officials are confined to a closed loop of walled-off hotels and venues accessible only to them. Already, Games officials report 93 COVID cases inside the bubble, while outside, Chinese fans can no longer buy Olympics tickets. It's a pity, but there's no way, he says. Chinese officials are so fearful of crossover, drivers were warned to avoid Olympics vehicles, even if there's an accident. The city now in full emergency mode, days before the Games begin. Janice Mackey-Freyer, NBC News, Beijing.
And we have some breaking news from the Baseball Hall of Fame. Three-time World Series champ and former Boston Red Sox David Big Papi Ortiz is the lone inductee voted into the class of 2022. It's his first year of eligibility. Baseball writers for the 10th straight year rejected former slugger Barry Bonds and pitching ace Roger Clemens over their suspected use of performance-enhancing drugs.
We are hearing for the first time from Capitol Officer Eugene Goodman in his own words. The country, the world saw those images. Video capturing him leading riders up the stairs and away from the Senate chamber on January 6th. More than a year later, he's now talking. Rachel Scott at the Capitol.
He's the hero officer seen directing Senator Mitt Romney to safety as the rioters drew even closer. Today, Officer Eugene Goodman describing that experience for the first time since the insurrection.
I was just in go mode, you know what I mean?
On the podcast, Three Brothers No Sense, Goodman says he didn't even know the mob was nearly upon him, steps away from the Senate chamber.
When you see me come up the stairs and you see me look, before I had went down the stairs to look at the door, people were actually out there and standing around and all that kind of stuff. So I told them I think they're downstairs. So when I went down there and I get confronted by people, I'm like, oh, heck, they're actually in the building. I honestly didn't know that they were that far in the building.
Goodman describing how he and his fellow officers didn't want to escalate the situation.
It could have easily been a bloodbath. So kudos to everybody there that showed a measure of restraint with regards to deadly force, because it could have been bad, really, really bad.
David, and Officer Eugene Goodman has wanted to keep a low profile. He says he felt comfortable enough opening up in this podcast, noting that one of the hosts is a personal friend and fellow Capitol Police officer. David?
Yeah, he waited more than a year to talk. Rachel, thank you.
9 other members of that anti-government militia pleaded not guilty today to charges including seditious conspiracy for their alleged roles in the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol. Tonight, one of the heroes of that dark day is speaking out for the first time. And CBS's Scott McFarland has his story.
Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman, the heroic cop who allowed the mob to chase him up the stairs and drew them away from the Senate chamber, is credited with possibly saving Vice President Mike Pence and several senators as they were forced to evacuate. In the years since, it's been Goodman who's been eluding. A curtain call.
I didn't know they had gotten that far up into the building. So.
In a new podcast, he's opening up for the first time publicly.
You want to de-escalate, but at the same time, you want to survive first. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In this now famous video revealed during President Trump's second impeachment trial, Goodman runs by Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney and tells him to turn around and run for safety.
It could have easily been a bloodbath. So kudos to everybody there that showed a measure of restraint with regards to deadly force, because it could have been bad. Yeah. Really, really bad.
Goodman would escort Vice President Kamala Harris at the inauguration and was later honored with the Congressional Gold Medal.
Officer Goodman, thank you.
An Iraq war veteran, Goodman says his military training served him well.
I was in the infantry. They was like my platoon sergeant, he would say, figure it out or die.
1 year later, Officer Goodman remains with the U.S. Capitol Police Department. His colleagues say, like so many here, he returned to work right after January 6th. His colleagues also say he's averse to the limelight and did that podcast because it involved one of his friends. Nora?
Well, it's good to hear from Officer Goodman. Scott McFarland, thank you.
Back home, a second NYPD officer has died days after a shooting left him with critical injuries. 27-year-old Wilbert Mora was wounded on Friday when a gunman opened fire during a domestic call. Mora's 22-year-old rookie partner Jason Rivera was also killed. The suspected gunman was wounded at the scene and died on Monday. A new warning from the Finally, with all that's going on in the world, consider this simple message that started in Ocean City, Maryland, and was discovered in a bottle across the Atlantic. Here's Kristen Dahlgren.
There is nothing more magical than a message in a bottle. So when Sasha Yanyak and his beloved neighbor and fishing partner, Mr. Wayne, found one 3 years ago, they decided to pay it forward, repacking the bottle with their own note.
We went 1 mile offshore, off Ocean City, Maryland, and we threw it in, and it just started sailing.
The now 14-year-old didn't give it much thought until this month. More than 3 years later and half a world away, Rita Simmons and Kieran Marin were walking on this Irish beach when they noticed something in the sand.
You could see a wee bow was tied up to something in the bottle. And so we sort of knew right away there was a message in the bottle. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's something you sort of dream of as a kid.
And so they reached out to the boy who wrote the note, finding Sasha's father through Facebook.
I was excited and surprised it actually made it somewhere.
They connected online and have now forged a friendship.
Universe has just brought us together. They're sending us family photos and we're finding out a little bit more, as we each day.
New friends, a good reminder of an old one. Mr. Wayne died 3 months ago.
That bottle just reflects the happy time that they had together.
We found it at exactly the right time in Sasha's life. Hopefully, it'll bring him some good into his life.
There's already talk of a visit to Ireland, thanks to a bottle, the sea, and the magic of friendship. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News.
How about that? That's Nightly News for this Tuesday. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
You're the best.